Session 1 is the importance of moving the dial. Attracting people to food and fibre sector is challenging, and in a tight labour market, people with the essential skills and expertise is absolutely, getting them is absolutely critical and very difficult. Understanding the situation and when and where to engage and what strategy to implement is key to a successful recruitment or attraction process and gaining the numbers we need in the workforce. There is a time, so we've got 2 speakers. All right, the first speaker, Vaughan Wilson from Scarlatti, will talk on workforce shortages and what can be done to alleviate the challenge. And then following Vaughan, we have Jacinta Penn, and she will talk about what we can grow with curiosity, looking more at this in the school space and some work she's done there with us. All right, there'll be an opportunity following each speaker to ask questions. Please wait, because this is being recorded. Could you please wait until a microphone's brought to you so that we can record your question? All right, so without further ado, Vaughan.
Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing with the Food and Fibre Cove on their attraction and retention program. And so we've been looking at some of the opportunities, I guess, that we can use with our levers around how we can sort of address these workforce shortages. Yeah. So just quickly, for those who haven't heard of Scarlatti before, we're a research and evaluation firm based out of the Waikato, but we're across the country. And so you'll be hearing from 2 of us today. Adam is here also, who will be presenting later this afternoon. And so since about August last year, we've been working with the Food and Fibre Cove on their attraction and retention program. And so the program was really looking at addressing sort of one question. It was kind of come in 2 parts. So the first part was why, despite lots of effort from lots of people, have workforce shortages persisted across the food and fibre sector? And the second part is there anything novel that we can do to try and address these shortages? And so what I'm going to talk about is probably focusing more on that second part around the opportunities that we have to address these shortages. And so we started with just understanding what our what our levers are, I guess. And so the first 3 are probably reasonably well understood, I'd imagine. We could either attract more people, we could retain more people. As Ian sort of alluded to, we could grow the productivity of our people, so whether that's with their skills and their capability or the technology that they have available to them, and then reduce the people we need that way. And again, the fourth one, which is potentially a little bit more contentious, but we could look at reducing the output of the sector and in turn reducing the number of people we need. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like Ian sort of said, it creates opportunities in other areas for the sector to grow. But for today, I'm just going to focus on those first 2 levers, which is where most of our research program and our work with the Cove has been centred. So starting with attraction, so attracting more people. We did a bit of a current sort of evaluation of the current landscape, and we found that there was about 180 sort of initiatives across the sector that had some kind of attraction or retention sort of focus. A lot of those had it as sort of as a side benefit or a secondary benefit, and so we narrowed it down to about 35 initiatives that had attraction as a real sort of core focus of its being. And so collectively, those initiatives, we'll call them from now on about a portfolio of attraction initiatives, were collectively costing around between $5 and $10 million. And so we looked at that portfolio of initiatives, and we thought, well, what does good attraction actually look like? And so from this work and from other work as well, we've been sort of understanding that there's 4 kind of principles that we will look at around what could good attraction look like. And it's not an exclusive list. There'll be others that people will want to add, but these are, the 4 that we kind of come back to. And so we've got an integrated industry effort. We've got clear pathways from the attraction and sort of the advertising and marketing through to the job placement and the employment. We've got intentional targeting of key audiences, and the initiative is sustainably funded. And so in a bit of a, I guess, sort of school report kind of approach, we've gone through and sort of evaluated how well we think that attraction portfolio of initiatives has done against all of these, has done at integrating all of these principles. And so I'll skip through because I should have put them all on one slide, but the numbers are reasonably arbitrary. They're sort of our gut feel on how we feel the portfolio has integrated them, but effectively they're meant to sort of indicate that we don't really feel they've been across the portfolio. There's certainly initiatives which have done these, but across the portfolio maybe it hasn't been integrated as consistently as it could have been. And so we think that the sector could be doing better when it's looking at attracting talent. And that's an easy statement to make because there's not a lot of, I guess, empirical data that we can use to actually test that. And so we were thinking about how we could test that, how we could test the statement. And so we wanted to build a model that we could impose these different attraction initiatives on a workforce and evaluate how effective they were or how they impacted the number of people that were coming in. And so we started to think of this in a bit of a different way. Imagine anyone in the New Zealand population will have a probability that they'll enter the workforce. And that probability will be influenced by the different experiences they encounter over their life. Things like a rural upbringing, maybe studying a relevant qualification, the talent attraction initiatives, they'll all expected to have a positive influence on that person's probability to enter the sector. Whereas things like ageing, as they get towards, as someone ages, moves towards sort of retirement age, exposure to bad press, lack of awareness, and the list goes on as well. Those kinds of things would have a negative influence on a person's probability that they will enter the workforce. And so we thought, well, if our model could characterise each of those experiences, then we could maybe understand how relatively effective they are at influencing an individual's likelihood that they'll enter the workforce. So by considering things like duration, the level of engagement, the strength, effectiveness of these different experiences, we built a model that does exactly that. And so this is an example of that output from the model for an individual person. So they start off at 0.5, they're 50% likelihood, they're neither likely nor unlikely to enter the workforce. And then over time, they engage with different experiences, different initiatives, and their probability changes. But our model didn't want to do this for one person, we wanted to do it for the whole workforce, so a bit of an agent-based approach. And so we built this. So it's a little bit laggy, but you can kind of see that as people age, they sort of move out. Their probability changes over time, and on the right there, the model pulls them into the workforce in any sort of time step. And so what we did was we imposed our attraction initiatives onto this workforce and to evaluate how effective they were at pulling in more people. But rather than looking at how many people they were actually pulling in, we looked at, the absolute improvement of the number of people they're pulling in. We looked at, well, how does that reduce the workforce shortage? And so this is where, the output from that. So the attraction initiatives were imposed in about 2024, and there's not a lot of distinguishable difference between what was happening otherwise. And so this kind of helped us, I guess, supported our statement earlier that we could be doing better with how attraction is in its current state. And in fact, if we were to take the current portfolio of attraction initiatives and evaluate what it would need to achieve to have meaningful change, and so meaningful change, we're looking at a 50% reduction in the workforce shortages, which is ambitious, but it proves it's more illustrative, that we'd be looking at more than 65 times more of the equivalent spending. And so that's not to say that attraction doesn't have its place. It just sort of comes back to those 4 key principles that we could be doing better to consistently integrate them in our initiatives. Now I'm going to touch on retention, and I'm just running a little bit of time, so I'll quickly move through these. We wanted to look at retention a little bit differently. We didn't do the current landscape that we did for the attraction, but what we did find when we were going through the initial landscape was that retention initiatives, current retention initiatives, were really looking at sort of the workplace challenges, so the things like workplace environments, wage rates, rosters, those kinds of things, which also had an attraction benefit as well as a barrier to entry. But we wanted to look at retention and how people come into the sector and how long they stay for. So this is a retention profile. And so imagine a cohort of people that come into the workforce at the top. This sort of indicates how long they stay for. And so we've used horticulture and dairy here just as sort of two extremes. So for example, after 6 months in the horticulture industry, we're losing, I don't know, somewhere around 70%. There's about 30% of that cohort remaining. And so from the curve, it's very steep at the start and it sort of levels out a little bit. And so we can kind of see that there are retention in those first 12 months, so in the first year of employment, is a lot lower than retention after 12 months. So we can get people past that 12-month mark, the likelihood of retaining them in the sector is a lot greater. And so in the food and fibre sector annually, we're looking at about 75,000 people coming into the sector. And so that retention in the first 12 months being low, we're looking at about 50,000 people leaving within that first 12 months, on average, across the sector. And that's for a number of reasons. They may be coming into the sector and intending to leave after 2, 3, 4 months, and so a planned departure. They may be a seasonal employee, particularly for horticulture sectors, so they're coming in, they're meeting a seasonal demand, and then they're leaving again. They may have had a bad experience with their employer or with the industry. It may not have been what they expected, and they may just have had new opportunities. It's a competitive labour market, there's new opportunities popping up all the time. But it's not really clear how important each of these opportunities are, or each of these factors are. And so we wanted to compare the opportunity with retention in this first year, improving the retention of first-year employees to the attraction initiatives. And so we thought of this in hours of exposure generated, hours of exposure to the food and fibre sector generated by each of these groups. And so for those first-year employees, the people that are coming in and then leaving again, we estimated that there'd be about 30 million hours of exposure generated by that group of people. And by comparison, the talent attraction initiatives, which are linked to sort of schools and that sort of funding, were about 10 times less, so about 3 million hours. And then further talent attraction initiatives linked to sort of industry or government linked, about 100 times less, at sort of around 300,000. So those are just midpoints of a range. And so that's kind of just really emphasising the opportunity to improve the retention of first-year employees. We're getting them into the sector, they're getting all this exposure, and then they're leaving us. And so that's kind of the gist of my presentation, really, is that we're identifying the opportunity for first-year retention and looking at what an initiative could entail to improve the retention of that group of people. But before looking at what the design of that initiative looks like, we're really coming back to understanding, there's an important need, I guess, to understand how important these different factors are so that we can really help with ensuring that the design of that retention initiative is effective and going to sort of achieve what we hope it could achieve. So that's kind of, we're partway through the work at the moment, and so that's where we're heading now, is sort of understanding those different factors.
Right, has anyone got any questions for Vaughan? Are you going to get?
Oh, someone got their hand up? Oh, over here.
Over there.
Here you go.
Tēnā koe, ko Helen Ho. So the data there includes the range of workers, so ones that are seasonal as well as ones that are long-term or hopefully long-term?
Is that this chart?
Or just, who's being retained. So presumably we know seasonal workers or people come here on temporary things aren't planning to be retained. So do you know what is different in the experience of the ones who you should be seeking to retain, So it's hard to really understand what you're going to invest your time and effort into if you can't distinguish the different market for staff. And also, too, within that, the second part of the question is, do you know the characteristics of those people? So are they local, are they living locally, or do they come from other places? Are they Māori? What are the drivers for them wanting to work and support in this industry?
Short answer is no, we don't know that yet, but that's exactly the kind of work that we're taking this research program in now. We had initially planned to look at designing a pilot for retention, but really understood kind of the more we got into the project that that the reasons why people are leaving, we don't really have a good understanding, I guess, of why people are leaving. We know broadly why. Some of those are up there, but actually really understanding the people that are leaving for those reasons and how many people are leaving for those reasons is something that we're looking at moving towards in our sort of next few months with this. I guess an interesting point with that will be how many of these factors we can actually address in the design of an intervention. New opportunities, it's really coming down to how attractive is the food and fibre sector compared to others, whereas we might have someone that comes into the sector, they have a bad experience, and actually rather than them just leaving, we might be able to put not a safety net, but some kind of wraparound support that says, well, you've had a bad experience, how can we improve that with our next opportunity? And so we need to understand a lot more around the kind of people that are leaving for these reasons and why, and understand whether we can actually influence that reason and retain them.
Yep, this microphone coming.
Kia ora. Look, I just want to pick up on my colleague's point there. From a horticultural perspective, the anomaly isn't really relevant given the huge amount of seasonal staff that are taken on with only the intention of doing a short period of time. So I'd argue that graph probably isn't quite as honest, as true as it should be.
Yeah.
But the other aspect is, in terms of those that do depart, the pastoral support element is critical. So we all know that pastoral support and really, really authentic pastoral support for all of our communities that work with us is really important. So, in your work going forward, it would be great to see a much better or a much bigger sort of look at that in relation to what good pastoral support can achieve in terms of, retention.
Yep. Yeah, I'll appreciate that. I guess the chart is a little bit misleading potentially with including that. I think by breaking it out by industry, we've taken sort of a reduced kind of view on this, but breaking out by industry hopefully helps us identify where the seasonal labour is more of an influence than others. But yeah, no, thanks for the feedback.
I guess the sort of follow-on from that is how much the analysis is focused on industries or the sector, because some other pieces of information that we're aware of is that a large number of those people who leave one part of our sector go to another part of our sector.
Yeah.
And so I think understanding how that works and whether we can retain them within the sector, if not within the industry, and that might explain some of the answer about how we're actually able to have a seasonal labour force that actually is sustainable.
Anyone else got a question?
Does
A few years ago, Adam put some data up there which implied that the best size effect for impact or impressing young people was the curriculum and what happens to them in their school learning environment. Right, it was a very marginal benefit, but that pre-employment exposure, you alluded to that in the attraction side. Is that a factor also you're going to look at in terms of retention?
Do you mean in terms of if people are going through that, how long they retain in the sector for?
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think it's something that we've looked at in the food and fibre sector before, but it is something that we've done in other industries, so it is certainly something we would probably want to look at. The people that come through those secondary school sort of qualifications, how long are they staying in the sector for compared to people that don't? Is that kind of what, yeah. It's not something we've done yet, but in the next phase of work, we're looking at extending this kind of analysis. So that's something that we could look at.
And the level 3, level 4 students who do and the level 3, 4 students post-secondary that aren't going straight into work.
Just down the back.
Oh, sorry.
Kia ora, Natalie from Primary ITO Te Pukenga. Just wondering if the next part of your research is also going to look at more around the demographics in terms of age. There's a lot that's quite different from a school leaver to someone who's actually a career changer in terms of, what they need from an awareness perspective as well as a retention. I look at our stats and the average age of our learner is 32, so they're not necessarily coming straight out of school, but yeah, there's some nuances there in terms of age.
Yeah, no, it will be. This chart is a static image from a dashboard that's actually quite interactive, and so you're able to sort of filter by age and a few other demographics as well. So it is kind of the information that we have. So yes, it will be something that we'll certainly consider.
Kia ora, Tatiana. My question is about the source of the data. There's a lot of conversation about the data. MPI is about to release a report that looks at workforce data today, and I encourage everyone to have a look at that, Workforce Insights. And previously, last year, we had a presentation from them talking about Workforce Insights and the data that they have, and they're using Stats New Zealand IDI data. What were your data sources?
It was the same, the IRD data and the IDI. Yep.
Great. Right,
Jeff.
microphone's coming.
Thanks, Jeff Taylor from Dairy NZ, and we're obviously one of the not so hotly performing sectors. I guess the challenge here is how do we look forward? I think if we take what Ian said to us, what does the employment experience look like in the future? This massive drop-off, whether it's in horticulture or dairy, is an opportunity for us, and how do we address that opportunity?
Yeah, it's all, I guess, very exciting. There's a huge opportunity here that we're looking at. I think I kind of skipped over a little bit at the end, but there's a lot of opportunity with what this initiative could look like. And in reality, it's probably not one initiative. It's probably a group of initiatives that are sort of working together towards the same goal. The pastoral care, like Erin said earlier, is a huge part of that. And also another strong part will probably be the social and professional networks as well, creating particularly for sort of new entrants, some kind of connection with other people in the area that have we call them a near peer, someone that's sort of a few years ahead of them. Just someone that they can sort of engage with, they can talk to more in a social context as sort of more sort of support.
Vaughan, I guess the other part of that is just the negative or the impact on social licence that huge churn is having in those first 12 months. Mm-hmm. Getting over that is actually a big part of that opportunity as well.
Yep.
Any other questions? I was just going to mention that there's 2 phases of the situation analysis. So they're on our Food and Fibre Cove knowledge base, and there's links to access that dashboard so you can have a play around with all that data and obtain the information that you may need. But yeah, thank you, Vaughan. I think that's all the questions.
Cool. Thanks.